succession plan. Very few have successors. I want you to hold on to that distinction for the next few minutes because it does a lot of work. A succession plan is a document. It has names in boxes, it has timelines in a spreadsheet, and a sign off from the board or the leadership team. It satisfies the HR governance requirement. It gets filled and then it gets filed. In most organizations, it is never looked at again until the day someone leaves and HR opens a drawer and finds a plan that names a person who also left 2 years ago. That is not a pipeline. That is ambitious paperwork. Today we are talking about why succession planning fails. Not because organizations don't take it seriously on paper, but because the system was never actually designed to produce readiness. The plan was always perhaps the output. Readiness was never the goal. So let's start with how succession plans come to exist. A board will ask for one, an auditor flags the risk of a key person dependency. Someone in HR gets the task, builds the template, identifies critical positions, populates boxes with names, and submits the document. The process is real, and so is the effort that is associated with that. But notice that the process is optimizing for completion, not capabilities. The success criterion for a succession plan, as most organizations run it at least, is submission of the succession plan. Did you produce it? Yes. Then it's done. Nobody asks, are people in those boxes actually ready than they were last year? Is there a structured development program running underneath that to support the succession pipeline or planning? Are they getting the exposure to decisions and perhaps relationships, the institutional knowledge that the role actually requires? Those questions don't get asked because they are harder to document. And in most HR functions, if you can't document it, it doesn't count. What is not recorded doesn't exist. Yeah? So we produce what we can document. We produce the plan, and then we call that succession planning. And so we wonder why, when a critical role falls vacant, we are still scrambling to find someone to fill the role. So HR did not fail at succession planning. HR succeeded at developing or producing a succession planning document. Those are not the same thing. And we need to be honest about the difference between succession planning and succession planning documentation. There's a third layer to all this, and it is the one that makes the first two almost inevitable in a certain type of organization. The more flatter organizations, I think that is something that is characteristic of broadly smaller organizations with that operate with flatter structures. Maybe 2, maybe 3 real leadership tiers, a senior management team that sits at the top, and then a middle layer of managers and coordinating individuals, while there's a large operational base. There are not a lot of rungs in this ladder, you see, which means that when HR tries to build a succession pipeline, there's an immediate structural problem. Where do you put someone to develop them when the scope is so narrow like this? The real development requires exposure. It requires that a person sits in rooms where consequential decisions are made, where they manage budgets that matter. They lead teams complex enough to teach them something that they fail safely, let's say, meaning at a scale where the organization can absorb the learning without cataclysmic consequences. Now let's talk about what happens to the person whose name gets put in that box. In most organizations, succession identification is not a quiet, confidential process. It leaks. It always leaks. People will talk, managers will signal. the identified person starts to perceive thorough treatment that confirms what they suspect, that they've been chosen, that they are the chosen one. And then something shifts, not dramatically, not overnight, but it shifts either way. The hunger that made them visible in the first place starts to quiet down. The extra effort, the willingness to take risks, the proactive problem solving, these things, they begin to recede. Because consciously or not, they've begun to believe that the work of arriving is done. They are selected. They are the heir apparent. They are the identified successor. What more is there to prove? This is one of the most expensive mistakes in talent management, and we almost never talk about it directly. Identification is not the same as development. Being chosen is not the same as being ready. Selection is a moment, right? But readiness, it's a process. And when we treat the former as evidence of the latter, we do two things simultaneously. We, on the one hand, stop developing the person and we stop watching them. The organization relaxes because it believes the pipeline is full. On the other hand, the individual relaxes because they believe they've arrived, right? And then the vacancy opens and everyone is surprised to discover that the person in the box is not actually ready to sit in the box. So, the succession plan said they were next, but nobody asked whether next meant this person was actually ready. Which is why, when we're having conversations around succession, the criticality of the process is not in just coming up with a grid where we slot people, but it is what follows when you profile people in terms of readiness. Whether someone is ready now, ready in a few years, maybe in 3 or 2 years, or ready in 5 years, it's well and good. However, what then follows from you putting people in these clusters of readiness, it should be development interventions that then enable this profiling to speak to future-proofing roles in terms of capabilities and preparedness. So, when you develop succession pipelines and identify successors, what then should follow, which is more imperative, is the preparation of those people or expediting the readiness of these individuals to assume roles in the shortest possible timeline. But that is the bit that is avoided because it comes with the responsibility of coming up with development plans. Perhaps it also requires a degree of resources, although for roles that we map as critical, it is highly unlikely that the kind of investment that we require may be at the level at which it requires us to have substantial budget allocations. So yes, what is more important in succession planning is what you then do to prepare people to assume those roles. You see, in a flat organization, these opportunities are scarce. The only real developmental role is the one you're trying to prepare someone for. So what do you do in that case? What can organizations do? They create workarounds. They're acting roles, their task assignments, shadow positions, secondments where they exist. These are not inherently bad, I have to say, but they are also not a pipeline. They are purely gestures at development inside a structure that was never designed to produce it. The hierarchy cannot generate the succession readiness the succession plan requires. So the plan will definitely get written. The name goes into the box. The development gestures, they get made. And the structure quietly ensures that the gap between identified and ready stays exactly where it was. I want to close with the honest version of this argument because I think HR needs to sit with it. We did not create this problem. The flat hierarchies, the HR governance pressures, the expectation that a document equals a strategy. These are organizational conditions, not HR failures. We work inside systems we did not design, but we are the ones producing documents that create the illusion that the work is done. So we can't make any excuses. We are the ones putting names in boxes and calling that a pipeline. And when the succession moment arrives and the person is not ready, we're surprised, even though we built the process that made this outcome nearly inevitable. The honest version of succession planning, I think it looks different. It starts with who is next, with what does readiness actually require. It maps the decisions, the relationships, the institutional knowledge, and the leadership moments that the role demands. And then it builds backward from there to ask whether the organization can actually provide those required experiences. In most organizations, the honest answer is not entirely, and that is a structural problem that a document would definitely not be able to solve. What HR can do, what we should do, is to name that gap clearly rather than to flower upon it with a plan that satisfies the governance requirement while leaving the readiness question unanswered. Because the board does not need a succession plan, the organization needs successors, right? And those are not the same thing. And the sooner, as HR, we stop conflating them, the sooner we can start doing work that actually matters to the business. This is People and Platforms. If this episode gave you something to think about, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you are sitting on a succession plan currently, I would ask you one simple question. When was the last time you opened it? Not to update it, no, but to test it. Until next time, it's People and Platforms, where organizations are examined, not only celebrated. Cheers.